Good morning, guys. If your freezer looks like this, with frost coming back unusually quickly after a defrost cycle, then this video is for you. Now, there are different names for this ice. Some people call it sugar snow, or some people call it hoarfrost, but basically it's formed by the direct deposition from water in the air into a solid without going through a liquid phase first. If it goes from solid to air, it's called sublimation. A real sexy and unique name. But the opposite is called deposition, a word I hate because it has so many other meanings. Now, here's something else that's interesting. If you look at this stand-up freezer, you'll see there's very little frost down here. And as you go up in the freezer, the amount of frost progressively increases. Now, the first thing that is likely to go through your mind in this situation is whether or not this freezer is recent enough to have a defrost cycle. As it turns out, this freezer is a couple of decades old, and so there's no defrost cycle here. So we've clearly got a problem of warm air entering our freezer somehow. Now, one of the commonest problems is to have a piece of food that's pressed up against the door so it can't shut properly, but this door seems to shut just fine. The second thing we look for is we look for this strip here to see if there's any gap that allows air to get inside. And let's just follow this down here. And what you can see is right there, air is getting in. There's a big crack, and I can feel that on the bottom as well, just in this lower left-hand corner. Now, that could be one of two problems. It could be a problem with the weather stripping itself, which has a magnetic strip inside. As it gets older, it gets less pliable, and of course when water freezes in there, it doesn't move. But the second thing that can happen is that these doors aren't made very well, and so they tend to be pretty floppy. And so it could be that the door has just been pulled out of square. How are we going to fix that? Now, if you go inside the door itself, what you'll see is that the weather stripping is actually held on with these screws. And these screws also hold the inner door panel onto the outer door panel. And so I'm going to first remove all of the components so that the inner door panel is not so heavy and doesn't all come crashing down as I loosen it off. And then I'm going to loosen off all of these bolts in an effort to try and straighten the door and allow it to be a bit more flat and rest against its frame. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm going around the whole door and I'm going at these bolts and I'm undoing them all a little bit, not taking them the whole thing out, just loosening them all off to try and free up the door so I can try and shift it back into a more square posture. Okay, now I'll show you how I'm doing this. I've got this laundry hamper wedged back, and I force the door back, and then with it in that position I'm tightening all the screws up. Okay, here's after my first attempt, and isn't that interesting? I've made things worse, but I've made them worse on the opposite side. So the basic principle then is good. I'm able to tweak this door, and so now I just have to fine-tune it so it lines up correctly. Alright, I think we got it. The apposition is nearly perfect all the way down with no evidence of crack at the bottom. And so now the difficult part begins. I've got to defrost the freezer, and so I've got to take all the food out, get rid of all this frost, clean it all out, and then put it back together again. We're all done. Lots more room in there. Now, if this procedure hadn't worked for me, my next step would have been to replace this magnetic weather stripping. This stuff is really expensive. I would have taken exact dimensions of the outside diameter all the way around, and I would have carefully taken some photographs of my phone to try and get an exact replacement at the local refrigeration supply store. Say, if this video helped you out and want to see more of them, then hit like or subscribe or leave a comment. I'd love to hear what others say. Thanks for watching.